Welcome to this first online networking event for professional urban farmers in Europe. My name is Nele Lauwers and I work for Boerenbond, which is one of the 10 partners of the project EFUA. And in Belgium, we are a farmers organization with around 16,000 members, farmers with very diverse business models, both in cities, but mainly around cities. I'm also very happy to have Henry here. Henry, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I'm in Saudi Arabia right now. It's great to be here and talk about this exciting topic and the results from the first barometer. I'm Henry Gordon Smith. I run a company called Agritecture, and we report on urban agriculture around the world as well as consult. And I'm honored to be a member of the EFUA Innovation Board. And although I sound American, I am European, so I think I'm allowed.
You're totally allowed. Thank you. Maybe before we start discussing the results of the first survey, I want to share some information about the EFUA project itself, because I think it's really worth it to go to the website and check what we are doing. I said, like, we are 10 partners around Europe, and it's a 4-year project with funding from the European Commission under the Horizon program. And the aim is actually to build better knowledge concerning urban agriculture. We all know, we all see a big potential in it, but we still see that, especially policymakers, they need more tools, they need more knowledge. And that's why we are working together now to build that knowledge, to also build the networks. And we have 3 important moments during the course of this project, and these are actually the conferences. Those moments are very important because we then are able to share the knowledge, build up together with the stakeholders in the field, together with scientists. Like last year during the FACTS conference, we already shared some knowledge about new typology, the benefits that were made more clear. And the next conference is actually called Next. It's in April, the 19th of April in Sofia, Bulgaria. It will be not online, so I'm very excited about that. And I think, Henry, you're also very excited about this next conference.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's my first time in Sofia. I'm so excited to meet the other board members and see all the participants in person. And as it's mentioned here, talk about strategies towards this. And we're also doing a workshop there where you can plan your own urban farm using our software. So it's really, really fun. And we're doing it for free as part of this project, which is really great. So really looking forward to being there and see Sofia for the first time too.
Yeah, the same for me, actually. So good that we are all both excited. Um, Also interesting to mention, I guess, is like next year, the final conference will be the action conference, where we will actually formulate specific advice for different policymakers. And that will be in Brussels. So somewhere in June, date is not already fixed, but I think that will be a very nice moment to share all the knowledge gathered and also, who knows, meet each other again in person. So what we want to do today is, like you saw, we are building a lot of knowledge, a lot of scientific research, but I think it's also very important to also connect urban farmers one-on-one with their colleagues throughout Europe. And that is actually what we want to do today. It's something that is still growing. We just started. We have the idea to organize this kind of event like one time per quarter, so 4 times in a year. It all starts with a short survey that most of you saw, like 10-ish questions, just to have an idea of how are you doing, what are the things you're concerned about, what are you working on, and then followed, we will discuss those very soon now, I mean, and followed then by a one-on-one networking event. So that is what we are going to do today, and also 3 other times throughout the year. Before I dive into the survey, let me explain a little bit about the new EFUA typology. That was actually the first question of the survey, and I want to refer to this. I hope you all see it. It's like a very nice brochure that EFUA published with a new typology on urban agriculture. Why is that important? I think again, for policymakers, we are in need of a good view of what is it about. In former days, we talked about the professional ones and the non-professional ones, but it's very much more diverse. To start with the urban farm, which is a farm in the neighborhood of a city, full soil production, wide variety of products, both vegetables, but can also be animals. Often they also have a big involvement of their consumers, thinking of community supported urban farms. And you also see that they most of the times also offer some activities and other services. So that's already a very nice type of urban agriculture. Next to it, you see a type called zero acreage farm. In the picture, you see a rather high-tech form of those zero acreage farms, but it could also be like low-tech. Could be all kind of production that is linked to a building. It's mostly vegetables like leafy greens, microgreens, herbs, etc. But it could also be insects, fish, and so on. So it's what is important here is like the circularity, closing loops, very resource and surface efficient. So that's all different types or that are linked to those zero acreage farm. Then below you see the do-it-yourself farm. That's a very specific type. That's not actually food that is sold there. It's more the opportunity you get as a consumer to grow your foods or to harvest the food yourself. So it looks like a little bit like an allotment garden, but the parcels are actually sold towards the consumers. And then the fourth type is a social farm, where they offer social and health services to people with a lot of different backgrounds. And where they also produce a lot of different types of products, which they often also consume themselves or process themselves. So this is in short. If you want to learn more about this, I would recommend you to go to the website and read the brochure, which gives a lot of more explanation and also illustrates with some very specific examples. Okay, done with the talking and the explanation. Henry, are you ready? Let's dive into the survey results.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So we kicked off with 26 respondents. I think that's decent for a first time. It can be more, and I like to see to grow this in future. To be also clear about the survey, most questions we asked the respondents was to ask them, how are your results now in the first quarter, referring to the first quarter of 2022. So that's the idea you should keep in your mind. It's not all applicable for all questions, but for some it is. You see how different types of farms responded. I think, yeah, that is what we kind of expected. You also see 3 responded like other, but if I read the descriptions, I felt like one could be like the do-it-yourself farm, which is maybe it's still like a new type. So we have to get to know that. And another one was actually a bit, describing like mushroom production. So I think we could add it then to the zero acreage farm. That's it, yeah. Henry, you're totally an expert on the EFUA typology now.
I'm trying to get up to speed.
Yeah, okay. Then we asked the respondents, so those 26 companies, what are your average yearly sales? And you see it's like also very diverse. I think that's also what we see in other studies. And it's not really linked to as one type is really in that category of yearly sales or another type is linked to that category. Each type has like has yearly sales that could be linked to different categories here. And then if you look into the evolution of the yearly profits, you see that actually majority answered that their yearly profit was or equal or increased. So if you see these numbers, you would feel like it's quite positive. But I would like to know from you, Henry, what kind of messages do you get from urban farmers around Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think just observing this data, despite the small sample size, and speaking to some other urban farmers, I think that you generally see the maturation of the farmers as they get more experienced drives profitability. Now, 20% increase in profitability is quite significant. So that's a pretty big number for any business. So I thought that was a pretty big jump to see. I'm not necessarily seeing that from the urban farmers that I speak to, especially considering the number of them that are zero acreage farms, which, as we know, there's been a lot of failures, struggles. The energy crisis has really affected the zero acreage farms, especially those that are using a lot of energy through vertical farming and LED lights. So, you know, we obviously aren't revealing like where they come from and which farms are having the most profitability here, but I would suspect that a lot of these are coming from more of the community farms, and there's still this wave, or urban farms, there's still this wave of interest in supporting your local farmer that you can see that's in your farm that drives up profitability. Well, I think the zero acreage farms, you know, they may be increasing in revenue in some cases, but I think profitability has probably gone down.
Yeah, that's not reflected in this survey, but yeah, of course, we only have the 26, but it's good that you add this. This gives more a realistic view.
What I'm hearing on the street, you know, and we see it. We see their struggle. So we have to be honest about that type of urban agriculture in Europe right now. It's a bit of a mixed bag, right? We see some that are still getting investments and growing, and we are going to see more failures still as vertical farming finds its fit in Europe.
Yeah, because also if you look at these answers, how many people do you employ and how is the workforce evolving, you would feel like they are quite optimistic.
Just to highlight the connection, right? So we talked about profitability and revenue, but it's also interesting to understand the farms from their scale, right? We see that a lot of these farms are pretty low on the number of staffing, right? The majority of them are up to 10. So that gives you some idea. And I think it also connects to profitability. We see that smaller farms, because they have lower CapEx, because they're more connected to the community, people are closer by, they actually have more profit. So if we look at building a small sort of specialty urban farm, its likelihood to be profitable is bigger. However, its likelihood to raise investment and get bigger is smaller. So this is a bit of the paradox with urban farming. If you want to build a small one, you can probably make money, have a nice profit, have a good little business. If you want to build a big multi-city investable company, you're going to be bigger. And so we see very few of them are more than 10 employees, which gives us a signal of why that profitability is probably higher in the previous analysis.
Yeah, okay, thank you to add this. If you then look to the question, who do you sell to? We see that the charts shows that the direct to consumer is still an important channel, and of course it's normal, I think, because it gives the opportunity to talk about the product and to give the transparency that people also want to pay for. If I ask the respondents, do you see an evolution this quarter, referring to the first quarter of last year, between those client groups? Were there shifts somewhere? Someone mentioned that they saw like direct to consumer evolving into direct to community. Can you say something about that, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this data to me helps us understand the kinds of farms that we're seeing and the size of them, and also profitability, right? Because if I'm selling directly to the consumer, I have the maximum margin. There's no one in the middle. In fact, there's sometimes no transportation costs. Sure, I may deliver it to a drop-off point, or they may come to the farm. So my margin on my product is the highest. So that also sort of helps us understand what's happening with these urban farms. I think that's actually very, very encouraging, because I think these kinds of urban farms, just from a sort of strategic perspective for the EU, is what we need to improve food resilience in the face of climate change and supply chain threats. We really need to have more urban farms distributed that can help us handle shocks in the system. But I think direct to community, maybe it's just a rebranding. You know, I like it. I think, you know, it's always weird to me when we talk about the people that eat our food as consumers. It feels like they're sort of like vampires just consuming and buying iPhones and products. It's a very like economic term. But I think when it comes to small scale urban farming, we really do see the people we feed, the people we impact, especially if you're DIY or social farm, it is community. So I think it's interesting to hear that and to see the values of these farms coming through the survey as well.
Yeah, that's like the language is more correct now. It's more fits the feeling what it is about. Oh, that's nice.
It's a relationship, right? It's a community. Is like it's a two-way relationship. It's not one way. It's not I give you food, you consume. It's connected, right? They support the farms, and that's I talk about subscriptions as well, which is I think very related to direct to community.
Yeah, well, when you mention subscriptions, I can go to this slides. We see there that most of the urban farms reacted positive on the question, do you sell subscriptions? So it's an important tool there. And the ones who answered positive said that they saw the number of subscriptions that were equal or increasing. Do you see, what is your idea about this one?
Well, again, I think this is a good signal of the bright business model for farms of this size and farms with this sort of, again, these values focused on community, focused on direct to community, but also relatively small scale. Again, we saw that some of them are in the social farm category as well. So I think it's great. It's increasing. The fact that it's increasing and not decreasing to me is a signal that the community values it. One, which is very, very important. If you want to support local farms, urban farms, even organic farms near the city, community supported agriculture, as we call it in the US, is the best way. It's these subscriptions. It's the way you say, hey, I trust you to provide me with food that meets my values, that is going to nourish me, that is clean and local, but I'm going to give you that money and commit to give you that money consistently. So I think it's a really good signal of the fact that the community and the residents in the EU are listening, as well as the farmers being very strategic about the most profitable, resilient way to sell. I would really be really interested to know if the zero acreage farms, because you see some small ones, you see these mushroom, how are they engaging with subscriptions? Because the subscriptions tend to be more about, look, if your potato is big one week and smaller the other, or if you get a potato one week and a tomato, then it's a little bit usually related to seasonality and differences in the product and the trust that you get. Whatever you get in the box, you're going to sort of be happy with. But when it comes to zero acreage farms, their product is consistency, and so in some ways it's more appealing for subscription, and I think also for the next generation, maybe more tech-enabled subscription. So I'd like to dig deeper here at the next conference to understand, how are the existing farms using technology to engage with subscription, and how are zero acreage farms trying to use the subscription model. I'm curious to get into that.
Yeah, maybe for a next survey then, or a workshop. Good idea. Next to food, of course, many companies look at selling services. You see the results of that question here. What I saw here was like the companies who were answering none. It's 8. It's quite high because it's often important for an urban farm to be viable. Would you have some advice or about that?
Yeah, this was a really interesting one to me. And so there's a couple things, again, just to emphasize what I've already sort of talked about. If you're a smaller scale farm and you're outdoor and you're close to the community, it really makes sense to have tours and workshops. There is additional labor around that, right? You need to probably have somebody who's dedicated to that. But in the end, you tend to have really good margins as well. This could be driving profitability. Think about it. People come to your farm, you're selling a workshop, you probably get at least 50% profit margin on the workshop, which is in some cases higher than what you would get for the food product. And then you get the audience interested in your products. You get them to take social media images, which amplifies your customer base. So it's more than just providing services to generate revenue. It's also marketing, community engagement. And I think is one reason that you have to do it is because if you're small scale, you don't have the power of a large farm to distribute at scale and huge volume. So it's a way of really increasing the value and profitability of a small farm. And I think it's great to see the variety, right? Schools and children, tours, workshops, accommodation. I'd love to see more of that. Imagine if there was accommodation and urban farming combined. I mean, that would be really cool. I don't think anybody's done that yet, but I'd like to know who that one is. But I think if we look at the 8 that said none, I suspect that most of those, I haven't looked at the data behind the scenes, but I suspect that most of those are the 0 acreage farms. If you're a 0 acreage farm, you're typically in a closed environment. You're focused on actually maximizing yield, while some of the other farms are maximizing experience, community engagement, biophilia, biodiversity, green infrastructure, right? They're trying to do different things, while indoor farming or 0 acreage farming in the typology is about really just maximizing volume per square meter. So in that case, adding a tour that can also interrupt the controlled environment and can contaminate it is a lot more work, right? And the value there is less clear. Although I think that mushrooms in some cases could have great workshops that would be very engaging. But I think if you look at where I see vertical farming going around the world in Europe, very few of them actually do tours. It's quite a challenge for these environments and the pests that can contaminate the farm and the interruptions. So, and in the end, even if they're small, right? We saw some of these are small. Almost all the 0 acreage farms are looking to raise money because of their high capex, so they're going to get bigger. So the business model of tours is going to evaporate as they scale up, even if they're doing it at a small scale.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. Looking at the cost side, almost all mentioned that they saw increasing prices at suppliers. I don't think that is a surprise. And the different categories like labor and then also energy and linked to maybe also oil depending activities or logistics and packaging. What do you think? What do you see? Do you think of solutions in the future that might tackle these challenges?
I mean, look, this is tough, right? This is going to be one of the biggest challenges for all farmers. Is the prices of inputs, the prices of operations are going up, and we can only pass on so much of that cost to the consumer, and it's a really difficult thing because there's often a delay between the increases in the prices for farmers and the ability to pass that on to the consumer. It really doesn't work overnight, and that can really damage and break farmers down over time, especially if they're small scale. One of the things I think that's really missing from the urban farming discussion in general and in Europe is how do we move beyond production? Right? We see things like social farms and we see things like education and training, but they're all farms. They're all producing food. And again, that's obviously the most important foundation. But there's all these supporting parts of the ecosystem that are necessary. And urban agriculture doesn't just include production. It includes distribution. It includes processing. It includes things like food hubs. So I think shared resources between urban farms is a huge future, especially in Europe, where there's a circular economy, strategic benefit to that as well, and incentives in some cases. So what I mean is, can we produce some fertilizers for farms near to cities, focused on urban farms? Can we reduce the costs of materials? Can we have shared training centers that reduce the cost of labor and employee retention? I'd like to see these ecosystems develop, and actually we haven't really seen it. Even in Paris, that probably has accelerated the most urban farms in a short period of time, they're almost all farms, right? We haven't seen as much of the supporting ecosystem that's needed. And remember, the 5 A's of food security include agency, which is the policies and the supporting structures, which I think Paris and European cities have a good navigation of that. But I'd like to see more urban farm focused hubs, training centers, seed storage, fertilizers, shared resources would be really, really exciting for some European cities to lead, to reduce these costs in the long term. I have one more thing to say. This is an international problem. I was in Egypt recently, and in Egypt, this is a place that has a lot of potential for agriculture, a lot of agricultural talent, a big population, an ability to export as well as to produce locally, but they can't afford the capex and these inputs either. They're just too expensive to make sense for the economy there. So there was a farming company called Hydro Farms I met there, and they literally have taken every single piece of Dutch technology for greenhouses and found local suppliers for the buckets, for the tubes, for every single piece. They've created relationships with seed companies to breed and to produce seeds in Egypt, even with European. So, I think localizing that supply chain, Europe already benefits from producing a lot of these products, but there are some products from China, there's some products around the world that could be produced locally. So that kind of thinking will help reduce the capex, which can help manage some of this increase in OPEX.
That's an interesting view. I also hope that with the this kind of networking events, who knows, will also start or boosting that kind of cooperation between different parties. New plans for the short term. Maybe the idea you mentioned will be next time in the answers to boost that ecosystem. But we see that most of the respondents responded that they will execute plans as planned. None did explicitly say that they would cancel their plans or wind down their business. So that's good for the survey. It's positive. Yeah, if you ask what types of plans, you see them here, it's very recognizable, but organizational, also someone brought up to set up a cooperative to look for partners to build that ecosystem like you talked about. Also interesting, I thought, was someone thinking of greenhouse tomato and also the vertically produced baby leaves. So it is coming together, let's say like that. It's not longer like two different worlds. They are really looking at each other. I think that's also positive. And also someone mentioned the microfarms, which was kind of new for me, but it's a kind of an idea maybe you already saw.
I mean, sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I just to add some more, you know, to this, I think is very interesting. I think the combining greenhouse and vertical is something that I really believe in. The hybridization, right? We've seen for a long time, it's soil, greenhouse, vertical, and they're sort of separate, but it doesn't really make sense, especially if your focus is business and food security and sustainability. You start to see that, oh, we can match these things together, right? We can combine them. Outdoor is going to give certain benefits, greenhouse gives certain benefits, and vertical. So you start to see this. I mean, we saw even in this region, again, Pure Harvest, which is a greenhouse company, has invested and bought a vertical farming company. So now they do both. We're seeing the same things happen in the US. And I think in Europe, we're going to see that hybridization happen a lot. So that's what I refer to it as. The microfarms to me is like what InFarm did. I think that's interesting because it's not really that effective. Like it's a really short-term marketing play for companies, but as they get bigger, especially because they're mostly zero acreage farms, you know, as I said, move away from tours, they move away from events, and they tend to move away from micro farms. So we saw InFarm stopped theirs, and we see a lot of companies as they get bigger, they just say, okay, let's just build sort of plant factories. That's the most investable part of this business. But I do like micro farms. Like I think it's a great way to engage the consumer. I think it's a great way of bringing architecture and agriculture together, and I think it is a good marketing tool. So maybe we're seeing an evolution of this. Maybe we're going to see some new methods where they learn from what InFarm did and what others have done, because I still see them popping up. I mean, I see them all around the world. They're selling, they're growing, people are building their own. So it is a trend that I don't think is going to go anywhere, and that's probably because it's a very low-cost way to get in front of the consumer. Okay,
nice. Thank you for this extra information. And then the final question was, because you have all the economic numbers, I think an essential question is also, how are you doing? I'm happy to see a lot of the people said, okay, brilliant, one person, but still 7 people responded like, not so well, I need a break. And I think that's something you also recognize, Henry. What could you advise growing your business, your concept, all those challenges, and still being or staying in good health, which is actually the most essential? What would you advise?
Yeah, I think it's, as I thought about this one and I looked at this, I think to me, it always comes back to planning. Like, and I know you can't go back in time, so we'll talk about what you can do now, but I think like people have a lot of naivety about urban farming when they're getting started. You know, they imagine themselves in this beautiful farm, they imagine themselves feeding the community, they imagine themselves having a normal hours of job where they're engaged with greenery, but in reality, they tend to work a lot more hours. They tend to have many more years to get to profitability than they expected. And I think, you know, that's really difficult on any human being. And I think it's also really difficult on your partner, whoever that is, or your family, because they have to feel that pressure that you feel, and that makes you a lot more unwell. And I think that's what I hear a lot is I see farmers sometimes giving up, urban farmers giving up because their partner can't really take it anymore. There's a lot of pressure on the family overall, and they need to be home more. They need to be spending more time on investing in the family itself, or just providing more income. And I see that in many parts of the industry where people are like, okay, I cared about this for a long time, but now it's really about buying a house and getting a car and the realities of that. So I think like a lot of the millennials are getting older, and I think that they're facing a lot of the reality of what it means to be an urban farmer or any farmer or work even in agriculture. I mean, this is across the sector, you know, in any kind of part of this industry. It's not as competitive financially as some other sectors. So I think if you are thinking about getting started, take that time, have that conversation with your partner, really know what you're doing to plan the business so that you know what it's going to be like for you in reality. And that'll help ease some of that, because it's the surprise and the exhaustion of that surprise that can be really tough for people. I think right now, I think it's great that people are talking about it. I think the best thing we can do is to talk about this, is to create safe spaces where founders can talk to other founders. You know, we've created a WhatsApp group for controlled environment agriculture with different regions in there. I wouldn't say it's like therapy, but it could be that. You know, you can share how you're doing, you can share your frustrations. And I think it's very important that especially the leaders in these companies who probably filled in the survey can talk to each other about what's going on with them. Because what you find most of the time is that you're not alone, which makes you feel you're less crazy, which is a big part of solving the problem. And you start to get real ideas about how people solved specific problems that are causing you stress, a past outbreak, labor issues, dealing with the government. These are all things that everybody has been through one way or the other. We just need to talk to each other more. So that's my advice for if you're planning and getting started, just take more time to plan. And if you already have a farm and you're struggling, definitely make sure you talk to other farmers, and you'll feel a bit better, and you'll start to solve those problems, in my opinion.
I think that's a great opener for the conversation starters that is really coming up now. Thank you so much, Henry, to go through the results and put down some extra expertise to it. I think it was very interesting. Will you stay for the networking?
Yeah,
beginning right now.
I'll be here for a little bit. I've got some slots in there, and I'll try to keep them short. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you. And if I don't get a chance to talk to you now, definitely at the next conference. And of course, I'm motivated to help all kinds of urban farmers, even with quick advice. So I try to be very accessible. You could reach out to me, and I'll always try to at least give you a next step that's going to guide you moving forward a little bit more. Thank you for having me. This was really fun. And I just want to encourage everyone to fill in the survey next time. The more data we get, the more we can improve together. And I think we can do a lot better than 26. But this was a great start. And thanks for participating and learning with us here.
That's it. Thank you so much. And see you next time.